My name is Jacquie Molloy, and I'm responsible for all the projects and communications at Meaningful Ageing Australia. As we begin today's session, let's acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands where we're gathering. You can hold them in your mind, or you might like to write them in the chat. For the Melbourne team here on the northern side of Melbourne, it's the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. And at Meaningful Ageing Australia, we like to also acknowledge the spiritual strength and resilience of Australia's First Peoples. And we thank them for sharing their wisdom and love of land with us. Welcome. Today, our special guest is Christine Bryden. And Christine is one of a kind and representative of so many. She is a dementia advocate and author. She has an MBA, a graduate diploma in pastoral care and counselling, an extensive background as a biochemist and her work in the sciences. And she's been nominated and awarded several high honours. And she's someone living with dementia. We are delighted to have Christine join us today as we chat about dementia and spiritual care. Hello, Christine.
Hello, Jacquie. It's really good to be here.
It's wonderful to have you here. Now, Christine, we're going to just have a bit of a conversation today. So let me just make sure that we have you showing up. There we go. There you are on screen for us all. So for people on the Zoom with us here today, Christine, and if they haven't met you before or heard of you, perhaps you could tell us briefly a little bit about your dementia journey.
Well, it started a long time ago. In 1995, I was diagnosed, and back then, there was no expectation that you'd speak or do anything, that you'd immediately, go away and hide and cease your affairs and not be known about, seen again. But I was really lucky. I had a neurologist who was prepared to try and treat me with anti-dementia medication and to encourage me. He said, you're going to be, I don't know what will happen, what the future holds, but just do your best while you can. I then met Liz McKinley, and she encouraged me to write my feelings down, and they became my first book. And I was really upset and angry, really, at the beginning, at being treated as a nobody because I had dementia. And given no hope. And so really, right from the beginning, my journey was to try and give hope to others being diagnosed, that it wasn't necessarily the end of the road and that you could have some sort of future. It's a new journey, but it's not necessarily the end.
Yeah.
So it's a long time ago.
I think it's interesting right off the bat there, Christine, when you say that that you weren't given hope, and we think about then the responsibility of those in the position who are giving the diagnosis and those who are caring, that part of their mandate really should be to explore hope and to create the conditions for hope. That's sort of, we're getting into the area then of human rights, aren't we? Of the right of dignity as well. So speaking of that,
hope and respect.
Hope and respect.
The person with dementia as a full human being worthy of respect.
Yes, I mean,
why is that so surprising?
I know, exactly, right? I mean, how is this something that we are talking about in 2022 as well, of something where people are still, where we need the advocacy to ensure that. And so Meaningful Aging Australia, of course, hope is part of the equation of connection and meaning and purpose that we associate with spirituality and meeting those spiritual needs. So, what does spirituality mean to you, Christine? And has that changed over time? So, for example, has that changed since your diagnosis?
Well, I see spirituality as a search for meaning in life and connection. I suppose I've changed towards seeing it as relationships with others and with the divine, or what gives you that sense of purpose in life. It could be nature, could be animals. Everybody's different, and I think we need to respect people's differences. But we're on this planet for a limited time, and it's a question of why. And it's that search for why that I see as spirituality.
Yeah, meaning and purpose. You've had exposure to both through community and also in your position as an advocate to be aware of many people living with dementia who are accessing aged care services. Have you got an example of something you've seen or heard about or been told about of what you would consider to be kind of great spiritual care in action? Just how we might reflect on what it can look like, the various ways that spiritual care can be embodied and embraced for those giving care.
Well, in Japan, I've seen it. I have young carers in Japan, and I've seen them really show great respect to people with dementia and to engage them in activities that they enjoy and that give them meaning. For example, playing a musical instrument or planting a vegetable garden or going to the temple or the church, and they accompany them to these places and support them in that activity. In Australia, I haven't actually seen it as much. I've certainly seen places where the caregivers will acknowledge the person with dementia. Doesn't matter how many times, but to keep on saying, "Good morning, Mrs. So-and-so," again and again and again, even if they're just walking around the block. It's hard, but it's a question of accepting unusual behaviour as well as helping a person connect with what that person finds really, truly gives them meaning.
Yeah.
And now, for some people, they're very resistant to anything to do with religion, for example. I'm not religious, you'll hear a lot of times. Or I really don't want to hear about whatever it is. But when you really delve deeper, if you just listen to what it is that truly gives that person meaning and give them space to be themselves, that's the spirituality, not religion or church. It's listening, and it could be going outside for a walk or looking at their pictures or just generally being with someone and respecting them as a human being and not being critical of their behaviour. Just entering their space, their sense of reality.
As you know, we're working at the moment on a resource, Dementia and Spiritual Care. And earlier this year, I did a range of interviews with some of our members on this topic. And it was interesting because everybody had slightly different directions that they were coming in from, and also different experiences to relate and talk about. But there was one thing in particular that everybody articulated, and that was essentially know the person.
Yeah.
It's got to be an individual by individual relationship.
Yeah. And it's about relationships. That's what I see spirituality now. I've finally come to that view that it's all about relationships between people, or between what the person finds meaning, or the divine.
Yeah.
Whatever that means to the person as well.
Yeah.
But it's connection. We're just not on this planet to be all by ourselves. We're here to connect with others and to find meaning in our connections. And the trouble with people having dementia is it's more difficult for others to connect with us because we don't behave in normal ways. And it's awkward to connect with someone with dementia. You can sit with them and spend time, and it's difficult. People with dementia don't fit in a normal category. We're also very different. We can be very angry, very unpleasant, very quiet, all sorts of differences. And yet we desperately need to be related to. And that therefore is very individual.
You would be aware of our tool that we use here at Meaningful Aging, Connect To, with the 5 domains, which you've already kind of referenced, and certainly with the work that you've done with Liz is part of that. But those 5. So for those who are watching who haven't heard of Connect To, it's our model to explore spirituality and help people sort of assess their own, like find out where it is in, as Christine's saying, in those 5 dimensions of your connections and relationships to nature and creativity and self and others, and also something bigger, which is where religion would sit. So you can see that religion is one of those 5 areas, and that everyone's got their own combination. It sounds like, that, you've already talked about it, Christine, and we know from the work that some of our members do with Connect To, that it just seems to be that it's not a nice to have, it's a necessary part of understanding someone, and particularly someone with dementia who may be, depending on exactly what it is, what condition that they have, or at what point they are in how advanced it is, of how well they can communicate different things. But if you can create a map of what we love, what we feel most connected to, that's got to help. Would you like to see some sort of standard way of approaching, how we handle admissions, for example, in aged care services of people coming in with dementia, that have some standardization, some way of making sure that everyone's getting access to being understood?
None of us are very standard, but I think that definitely everybody has to be given the opportunity to find out more about them. It depends when a person accesses aged care. If we're already in a non-verbal stage, that's going to be very hard. But even someone lying in bed at a non-verbal stage can be connected with. You by touch.
Yeah.
I know we're not meant to do, there's so much we're limited from now, but there's touch and eye contact that we can, I just find there's so much that we can do to connect with people with dementia. The difficulty is we're not very standard books. So it's a question of finding out more from the families or friends, if they have any. Yeah. If not, it's a question of trying to connect, in a way that you try hard through visual, eye contact or touch, try and read the person. You've got to try and look through your eyes, communicate with your eyes.
Yeah.
And you've got to respect the person. We're just not an object to be labelled at admission and tick the boxes. We're a fully human being and we need to be respected for who we are and what we might or might not appreciate.
Yeah. I know on your website, you actually have a video, I think, of one of your MRIs.
Oh, yes.
And
old one, but yes.
Yeah. And I think you say something like, if people could actually see the brain damage of those who are living with dementia, they'd be cheering them on. They'd be, amazed and excited about every aspect of life that they could participate in.
Yeah.
It's
so hard, isn't it? Because it's a very mysterious type of illness or condition. And people don't understand how hard it is for us to try and cope with everyday life.
Yeah.
But yes, cheer us on, respect us, value us for who we are. Yeah. Even though our behaviour is very odd, might well be very odd, we're really doing the best we can.
Yes. And isn't that true of us all? I mean, yes. Why should those living with dementia be any different in this respect?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, if I had one arm or one leg, I'd be fully me, and everybody relate to fully me, but you're missing a leg or an arm. I'm missing a fair bit of my brain, and that makes it very different. Makes me very different in terms of my behaviour from how I used to be. But, yeah.
Yeah. Can you also, can you tell us, this is sort of, I suppose, part of your advocacy role, but why is it that the language that we use about dementia is so important for the person and our understanding of dementia? So, we've moved away from that very old-fashioned now use of, a dementia patient or a dementia sufferer, and we talk about someone who's living with dementia. Why is that important, that use of language?
It's vital. Unfortunately, I still hear the bad old language. Oh, she's dementing. She's demented. It's absolutely vital because we've got to separate the person from their condition. I'm still a fully human being, a person living with dementia. If I had cancer, I don't think anybody would talk about me as cancerous.
Yes.
Or cancered. It's just very different. We really need to respect the person and see it as a condition that's separate from me. It's what I'm living with. but it's not all of me. It doesn't completely take over me, you know. So the person has to come first.
Do you think it's ever, do you think there is ever the dynamic where someone who's living with dementia almost feels like they're being blamed for experiencing dementia?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
People get so annoyed because we don't remember something. And then we get talked about as if we're not in the room.
Yeah.
I've heard people say things, oh, he won't remember. And he's the person standing right next to them. It's like they're a log of wood or something. It's shocking. It is shocking how we're spoken about.
Mm.
I think it's even worse than people living with a disability who might be in a wheelchair who find people speaking across them. People with dementia find that they're often just totally excluded from the conversation because they're assumed to be unable to speak, unable to remember, unable to function normally, whatever normal might be. And I'm concerned. I mean, I've been advocating since 1995. And, you know, was it last year? I think I was sent a book to review and it still had all that terrible language in. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I feel as if I'm pushing a barrel uphill that keeps on coming back at me.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
I'm just going to have a look at the chat because I can see there are some things coming through. We've got a lovely comment here from Danuta. Christine, what an amazing human you are. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I am learning so much from this conversation. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Karen has said, I had someone tell me today that the lady at the memory clinic said I was going to go gaga. Whether that is what is said or not, it is the message taken away. Yeah.
That's shocking. Totally shocking.
I mean,
that's so wrong.
It is wrong, isn't it? I mean, that's
just losing your marbles and all of those terrible things that people say.
Yeah, yeah.
Why? I think I've got my own theory, which is it's fear of dementia. And it's by saying these dreadful things, people distance themselves from the condition. It's just wrong.
It's like a talisman, isn't it?
Yeah.
If I keep it over there and, you know, it won't happen to me.
Just get angry, people. Get angry if these things get said.
Yeah. I've also got a question here from Liliana. Christine, do you find intergenerational connections important? Are they helpful as opposed to being surrounded by people of all the same age?
Is it right? This one? It is on silent.
Sorry, team, can I get you to just check that everyone's on mute? So yeah, Christine, are intergenerational connections important and helpful?
Definitely. Children are wonderful. They accept you for who you are.
Yeah.
And it's just lovely. My grandchildren are a delight. So I do find definitely that children are very wise in the way they treat human beings. They're very wise, very accepting, very loving. Yeah. So yes, I do find, you know, it reminds me of that television program, the childcare centre next to an aged care facility. I can't remember what it was called, something about the 4-year-olds or something. And they just related to the people with dementia. It was a delight to see. I can't remember the name of the lady too. I know her, the professor that does it.
Old People's Home for 4-year-olds.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Rachel. Yeah. Oh, that's great. What I might do, Christine, is end the recording here.